Hey everyone, welcome back to Pole Obsession. This week I'm flying solo as Felix couldn't join us for this episode. But don't worry because I've got a fantastic guest to keep us company. Today you'll hear from the incredible Jessie, powerhouse entrepreneur and the driving force behind X-Pole Australia. She's not only built one of the country's go-to destinations for pole equipment, but she's also been a passionate advocate for the pole community, helping dancers all over Australia level up their training and chase their goals. Welcome. And I'm so excited to have you because I've been wanting you to do this for so long, and I know that you don't love talking publicly. So
No, I very much enjoy being in the background and not being in the spotlight. So thank you though, because it's a great opportunity to
yeah.
get the story out there and just tell people a little bit of the background and the history of what's happened in Australia and where we kind of came from.
Yeah, exactly. That's what everyone wants to know. So tell us about it. So how did X-Pole start? First of all, before we say how did X-Pole start, how did you start in pole?
Huh. Well, I had just moved back to Sydney from overseas, from Ireland, and I was, funny enough, I started belly dancing because I just wanted a little bit of a challenge. And a couple of the girls that I was going to belly dancing with, we were going fairly regularly, and I was really enjoying the kind of the friendship and the fun and the kind of silly side of it. And I was at the hairdressers, and there was an article in a magazine about Bobby's pole studio and about pole dancing. And I was like, oh, that sounds a little bit fun, a little bit different. So I dragged the girls along with me and we went across to the Castlereagh studio, which is probably about a good 45-minute drive from where I was living at the time. And we started going to beginner pole. And it was fun and it was exciting and it was a little bit, everyone thought it was so sexy, but it was also a little bit daggy because none of us could do anything. So here's us just kind of bopping around the poles. And pole 20 years ago was so different to what it is now in that it was the moves were so much simpler and there was no athletic ability required. And if you looked at the advanced moves, they're probably what you do in intermediate one or two these days. So when I'm talking beginners, it was literally like a choreographed kind of routine bopping around a pole. It was nothing too hectic, but it was fun. It was really fun.
And how long did you do that for?
So I arrived back to Sydney beginning of in January 2024. Oh, sorry, 2004, 2024. And I started Expo in August 2005.
So
So,
2004 was when Bobby's opened, is that right?
so it had just opened. Yeah, Bobby had had a studio, I believe, at home before that and was teaching in the clubs. And then probably Jamila or Candice could probably speak better to that than I could at the time. But it was, I didn't know any different. I thought she'd been teaching for ages. All I knew really about it was that the studio was there, all the poles. We've rocked up. They seemed to be these goddess teachers. And funny enough, Susie Q was one of my first teachers. And she was a baby back then, and she was about to leave for London. And so I think we had her for about 3 or 4 lessons, and then she took off and started a life in London. And Candice took over from there. So there's a lot of people that are still floating around in the industry that have actually been in the industry even longer than me, but not necessarily in the same capacity.
So who was there? So there was Bobby, there was Susie, there was Candice, who also, well, Susie and Candice are still doing it.
Yeah, Jamila. So
Jamila.
Jamila was actually as I understand it, was actually started Bobby's with Bobby, and she was actually Bobby's doubles partner at the time.
Oh.
So this is going back many, many years. And so she actually was talking to Bobby about starting Bobby's pole studio together. And then for whatever reason, this is the way I understand the story, things diverted and Bobby ended up starting with Vanessa and her husband Lino. And Jamila was a teacher there for many, many years.
So Jamila was supposed to open it with Bobby before Ness was even
there were
around.
discussions about it. Yeah, there were discussions about it.
Oh, all these
So
things that you know.
I know a lot. I know a lot in the background. I should know everything. I don't know, but I can't. But yeah, it's. I mean, Jamila was Bobby's doubles partner. They were working the clubs together. They were showgirls together. So they were very much the two iconic showgirls of Sydney of the time. So it was incredible. Like back in the day, if you wanted to see pole, there was no shows anywhere except for strip clubs to go and see pole. So as little baby Bobby students, we would go along and we would the show nights at the end of year or whatever were held in Platinum Stages, which was one of like Men's Gallery, which was one of the pole studio, oh sorry, the strip clubs in Sydney. And we'd all go in and, we all got dancers discounts on our drinks because we'd go and up at the bar and say, "Do you do a dancer's discount?" And they'd give you a half price drink, and it was great because even if you weren't actually a dancer, you go and claim your discount. And it was just a completely different era. And seeing the girls on stage in their element, just owning it, was just incredibly powerful to watch. And I think that's what really, really got me hooked in those early days was just seeing how in their femininity and in their power these beautiful women were, and I was just loved it.
Was there any part of you that thought when you were going to go to this class, oh, maybe it's going to be like really raunchy and they're not going to be wearing much, and I don't know about not wearing many clothes in a class like that? Did you think like that in any way?
Not really, because I'd come off the back of living in Europe for 4 years, and I'd spent a lot of time in Germany and Switzerland and Sweden and places like that. So for me, actually, people being kind of phobic about showing their bodies was different. I thought we were quite, you know, not prudish in a way. I'd lived in Ireland, so a lot of people didn't really run around with no clothes on over there. But like, I kind of went from living over there straight back to Sydney. I was fairly fit and stuff at the time. And I just went along with what everybody else was doing. I mean, I did belly dancing for a while. That was all about shaking your boobies and your tummy and your hips and stuff. So, that was, it wasn't, I didn't feel uncomfortable about it. But also the lighting, and it was felt very closed and a very safe environment to kind of move that way. It was very much no guys there, although there
Yeah,
was one guy, which is really funny. Total
tell me
side story.
about
He
the
was
guy.
actually, there was this guy there. He was really tall, you know, shaved bald head, probably in his, I don't know, mid 20s, early 20s, mid 20s. And, Ness had told us that he was gay and everything else, and he was in the class, and that's fine. And anyway, it was funny. And he became my first kind of male gay best friend in Sydney. And, I was just moved here, so I didn't have too many friends. Anyway, and so we'd go out and we do coffee every week at Stanley Street in Sydney City. And it was quite funny because we'd sit there and we'd be like, and he'd be like, "Oh, he's gorgeous." And I'd be like, "Yeah, he is." Anyway, he joined my Pilates class with me and later ended up dating and sleeping with my Pilates instructor. And she was very female. And it turned out he was actually not gay at all. But he was in the class with us. And he was there because he was just intrigued from a fitness perspective how all these tiny little girls could lift themselves and do such incredibly strong moves. So he wanted to be there not to pick up, or wasn't sleazy with anyone. He just wanted to train and wanted to train pole. So the safest way to do that was do the illusion that he was gay, and everybody went along with that. And it's quite funny because he was actually my accountant when I first started up my business. My daughter's god godparent. It's so fun. And he actually went when Bobby's Babes were touring, and he actually went to China with Bobby and did like a tour over there randomly with them.
So
So
he danced with them.
he danced with them, yeah.
Was he good?
Not regularly. Look, it's totally different to say, was he good by today's standards? Because today you've got, people like Chris Talbot who are just beautiful movers, and, Adam Lynn, who can just like, they're so graceful and their lines are beautiful and they're technically excellent.
Yeah.
Back in the day, like he was one of a handful of guys that actually went near a pole. So he looked like a bloke doing head rolls with no hair. Like,
Yeah.
he wasn't a technically trained dancer. But fair play to him. They had him up in little speedos and stuff up on stage doing head rolls and body rolls because there wasn't any sort of element of a masculine kind of pole environment for him to learn. It was literally all the moves he was doing were very feminine, and he gave
Yeah.
it his best shot. So like he really did well.
I remember back in the day, we didn't have men. Like I started, when did I start? Maybe 2009. And there was no men in the classes. They just weren't allowed to be in the classes. So the studio owners that I was with, they were just like, no, 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 there's no men going to be in our classes. It wasn't, I was the very first studio to open in Canberra that allowed men. I was like, why not? Who cares?
Yeah,
You know, so
I think
yeah.
it came from a different perspective because I think coming out of a strip club environment, there's a very different dynamic between the men and women, right?
Mm,
And so it's a lot more about protecting the girls and, not having that sort of born of a better word, sleazeball kind of element coming in and kind of encroaching on what should be a feminine safe space.
mm.
And so I think that's probably why it was done that way. But I think things have evolved so much and people have seen polls so much now in a mainstream environment. I don't think it's actually an issue these days because so many guys have seen it and they don't necessarily all automatically go straight to, oh, all the girls are going to be there just taking their clothes off and, getting me a chair to sit down and watch. It's a very
Yeah,
different,
yeah, it is
very
different.
different.
Yeah. I think we still get occasionally. There will be some occasionally, but probably not like what you said previously because it was so different now. And everyone knows somebody who does pole dancing now. Everyone knows someone who does it.
Everybody, and usually half of them have got X-Poles too, which is quite funny. So from my side, so it's quite funny if they don't know anything about me, but they know the brand, so it's kind of quite funny.
Wow. That's good though, isn't it? That they know the brand. It's not a
It
bad thing.
is. It's been 20 years of hard work and really not so much pushing the brand out there, but really pushing out the difference between, genuine X-Poles and copycat product and fake product and the dangers associated with those. So I think that's been a big part of where we've really pushed the point of difference, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a huge. I remember talking to you about that like quite a lot, and it's quite huge. But I want to go back a little bit. So after your first class, what happened next?
I bought shoes.
Yeah,
I bought shoes.
you're right. 7 years in. So.
It was so funny. There was a lady in that used to come and sell shoes, and there was a Tony of Hollywood, I think they were, and they used to have them in the reception at Bobby's. And so it was, they weren't even big. They weren't even platform. Like they're probably 1 centimeter platform at the front. They might have just been normal stiletto height, but they were clear and they had the plastic clear front and the plastic clear straps, which you can imagine looked fabulous after so much gradual tan and how many weeks they just looked awful. But that's fine. They were my first pair of shoes, and you'd put them on, and you had to have shoes dancing at Bobby's. It wasn't really a thing where you danced barefoot.
No, well, it was a different style, wasn't it? It's a
It
sexy
was
style.
just, it was, well, they're the shoes that you wore for pole because, you wear runners for aerobics and, when you come to pole class, you wear high heels. So it was like just what you were told to do and what you just did what you were told. So yeah. So yeah, and then I just booked in and I kept going to classes and I did, my intermediate one, oh sorry, my beginners 1, 2, and 3, I think it was, and then went up to intermediate and did intermediate 1 and 2. And then it was around that sort of intermediate 2, intermediate 3 level. And I remember I was doing a couple of classes a week and I was coming in on the weekends and I really wanted to be as good as I could get. And I knew from my gym training that like there's only so far you can go with building muscle if you only do it once a week. Like
Yeah.
for, by the time you do your warm up and you cool down, like you're essentially doing dancing for half a week or half an hour a week. And I was like, I really wanted to get better and get better quickly. So I was doing 2 classes a week and I was doing my Sundays, and Sundays, you'd pay to use the studio, but then you'd also potentially have to borrow a pole or share a pole with somebody else. And I was like, there's got to be a better way because, I want to train at home and I'm quite determined to get good at this. And anyway, I remember I was in class with Bobby one time and she was just like, I said, oh, can I go up to the next level? Because, I've done intermediate 2 or whatever it was. Like I've done it like 2 or 3 times now and I really want to go up to the next level. And she said, no, you're not good enough yet. And I was so crushed. And I was just so crushed
Did she
because
say
I was like,
that?
sorry, yeah, pretty much very flat, very, very direct. She's a very direct lady. So she's like, no, you're not good enough. And I was like, okay. And I was so humbled, but I was so crushed because I was like, there are things that I've just never been good at. I'm small on the upper body and I've got longer legs. So just the weight proportions of lifting myself up. And I couldn't invert I mean, I could invert for the life of me, but I couldn't do shoulder mounts. And that's
Mm.
what she wanted me to be able to do. I couldn't do a shoulder mount. And anyway, so basically at that point in time, I was also starting Xpol in the background. And because I had researched with a friend of mine all of the poles that were available to me. And in Australia, they all had to be um, permanently mounted or fixed to your ceiling and floor, which I couldn't do because I was renting like most people in their 20s. And I was like, well, surely somewhere in the world there is going to be a pole that I can use in my house. And my friend Christy, who is an American girl, she's just like, oh, I found one in the States and it's called Little Minx. And it's a brand where you literally put a hook in the ceiling and you basically hook the pole on and then you essentially pressure mount it, but over a hook. And at the same time, I'd found these ones from the UK, which was Xpol. And that was Clive Coote, who had just launched this concept pole as it was at the time. And he'd shown it in a couple of different forums, as in, I don't even know how, it was some sort of a trade show or something, maybe possibly a fitness show or something. And Katie Coates was, of course, the girl in the face of the brand. So I looked and I researched and I contacted Clive because the biggest difference I found with Clive's versus any of the other polls that I'd researched, I hadn't seen anyone else invert on in their marketing materials. All
Yeah.
of these ones, even the ones that you get through sex shops, there were these little pogo stick type ones that you kind of pull down and then spring tension to the roof, like they do with the curtain holders. And I just you could see people standing next to them. You would see people occasionally with one leg up on them. You would see even very rarely people like sitting on the pole, but not actually really putting any force behind it, doing any dynamic moves or inverting. And Clive's pole with Katie on it was the first time I'd seen that. And so from there, I was contacting Clive and saying, setting in business plans and marketing plans because that was my background, and basically saying, right, by 2025, 1 in 10 people in Australia will have an X-Pole and I'm selling all of these big things.
Oh,
Because I was just like, if I love it so much and I find it so empowering, why wouldn't every single woman in Australia want a pole? I don't understand why they wouldn't. Being a 25-year-old or whatever I was thinking, I was
yeah.
just like, you know, it was common sense to me. If I wanted one, I couldn't understand why everyone else wouldn't want one, and sold him on those dreams. So um, that kind of came at a time where I'd kind of plateaued a little bit in my pole training with Bobby, and so I then became more focused on the business and more excited about that, and less focused on my time in the studio because I was like, I can just train at home and I'll get really, really good, and I'll learn how to shoulder mount, and I'll be able to take on the world. So that's kind of where it started.
So, what were you doing work-wise before?
I was in pharmaceutical marketing. So I'd been working over in Ireland in pharmaceuticals, originally for Roche or Hoffmann La Roche, as they call it over there, and then for for a German pharmaceutical company called Altana. And after a couple of years over there, there was a product manager's job that came up in Australia. And so I basically was put forward to the German head office, as a good candidate for that job because I'd already been working on the products. I knew the products. Anyway, it was very different. It was a very different corporate environment going from Ireland to Australia and Sydney. It was very red tape, very male dominated, very much boys' club in Australia. So I worked over here for, I don't know, a year, 18 months, and probably just over 18 months. And I was just getting so demoralized in my corporate job because I knew like every single thing they asked of me, I was delivering. Like back then, I no brain frog, can't even talk, no brain fog. I had a great brain. I was really switched on. I was young, I was capable, I was really driven. And I just kept getting put back in my box repeatedly. And I had reps coming up. I had a rep force of, 40 odd reps that were working, like doing doing sales calls for me. And, I had reps coming up and asking me straight up, how did you get the job? Insinuating that I'd slept my way to get the job. Nothing
Oh,
to do with the fact that I was clever or smart or had experience overseas or, yes, I'd had great opportunities. But I just things like that really knock your confidence when you're younger. And I think if I'd had really good, strong female role models, I would have just been like, stuff you guys. I'm going to just keep going on this kind of corporate course. But thank God I didn't, because actually I moved completely because I was working in pharmaceuticals and then started pole on the side. And then it was, the female empowerment side that actually pulled me more into pole and
yeah.
less and definitely out of corporate. So
So were you born in Australia or not?
yeah, I was. I was actually I'm a Melbourne girl originally.
Huh?
So yeah, so I grew up in St Kilda and
Did you?
moved around. Yeah.
I wonder if it's straight near me.
It was went to St Kilda Primary School. Anyone that's got kids will know that show Little Lunch. I was the OG Little Lunch. That was our playground. It's quite funny. So it's I moved from there. I sort of went to university and moved from there in my teens and moved over to Dublin pretty much straight away with intentions of backpacking and doing all of that, but ended up working in corporate marketing over there just because, why not get experience at the same time as
So you had
decent
a
money.
marketing degree?
I did. Well, I finished it off while I was over there, but I'd done a few things. Like I had a small business traineeship. I had a marketing certificate or a diploma in marketing. Sorry, it was. And I'd halfway finished. I was doing a double degree in media and marketing, and I'd half finished that. But then when I went to Ireland, of course, working in corporate over there, such a different world. They were like, oh, if you want to continue your studies, we'll just pay for it. So they paid the remaining modules and I finished it off while I was over there, which was fabulous. Paid off all my HECs while I was over there. So I just came back and I was like a clean slate. Um, Not that it made much difference because if you look at what we learnt during my marketing official studies back then, it's like such a different world to today. Like, the internet was starting, like Google was starting. There was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, no TikTok, no, content creators. It's just a completely different world.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Like you'd put an ad in a magazine or a newspaper. That was
We
your ad.
used to. That was Xpol in the early days. We used to advertise in Clio, Cosmo, Ralph. We did Fitness First TV because that was a thing back then. And so all the Fitness First gyms across Australia had the Xpol ads running for a while. We did fitness shows, we did Sexpo. So it was all about like, getting out there and getting the brand out there, but it was magazines. And we did do a little bit of radio, but not much because it was so expensive. So yeah.
TV is expensive too. So how did you get in contact with Clive? How did you know how to reach him?
Well, the internet must have been working by 2005 because that's how I found him. I have no idea how I ended up finding it. I don't know if it was Google or Yahoo possibly back then, but I was just literally I was researching. That's literally one of my superpowers is deep diving. It's the neurospicy side of me. I love deep diving and I love just researching and finding out as much detail as I can about things. And so it was just extensive, just online research and trying to find dance poles in, UK, Europe, America, like wherever I could. Yeah.
And how did you get the money for it?
So my credit card. So it's just like
Credit card?
you don't think about these things when you're in your 20s and you want to start a business. You're just like, what do I need to do? What are my action points? How do I start this? Because you don't think about the actual logistics of, oh, do I have to pay company insurance or do I have taxes or any of this? Do I need to pay a wage? And it's like, I'm going to leave corporate. Well, actually, I got forced to leave corporate because one of my reps saw an ad in Ralph magazine and brought it to the attention of our managing director. And he actually left it with the HR manager to deal with while he was away. And the HR manager confiscated my laptop and my work phone and wanted to take my personal phone as well, which was a bit dodgy. But anyway, and literally marched me off the premises like I'd stolen things or done drugs or something. It was ridiculous. Looking back, absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, and I was put on probation for 2 weeks. And luckily at the time I was actually, sorry?
Starting your own business.
Yes, for starting my own business. Don't forget though as well, pharmaceutical marketing, it's very conservative corporate. So I was flying around and I was, you know, basically seeing their key customers all over Australia with like very senior reps. And so some of the key gastroenterologists from across Australia, we're like I was having meetings with them. I'm representing the company. So for them to like see this thing in Ralph magazine, it wasn't like a big thing. It was just me and Susie, like, saying it was a poll ad. It wasn't a big deal, but
Because it was a picture of you.
it was a picture of me and Susie, and that's how it all came out.
Is that legal to?
So probably not. Probably not.
Illegal to
Yeah.
say for a
And if
picture.
I'd known that back in my 25-year-old self, I would have been I was very tenacious back then. I would have fought my corner and stuff. But also don't forget it comes off the back of, a year or a year and a half of being told to get back in my box by not only my reps and stuff, but also senior managers in the company who were, putting me in positions very deliberately to kind of see how I would go and to test me and to really, and every single time I was coming up well, but there was never any feedback that was positive, and there was never any feedback of like, oh, you did good on that, come on, we're going to do something else now or move on. But it was they kept putting me deliberately in very awkward positions with customers and with my reps, and like doing things like freezing budgets and not letting me talk about it to my rep team and things like that, where I'd have doctors come to me because they were needing certain things. I'd pass it up line and they'd ghost me. And then I would be looking like the one that was incompetent and not actually communicating things. And actually it was nothing to do with me. So there was a lot of that, and it was just head games. So I guess by the time it came to leaving, I was actually really wanting to leave anyway. And in my mind, if I left and I, ordered all of this stuff, and if I couldn't sell it, worst case, I'd just go back and I'd work at Bunnings and I'd work at Coles in the evenings and I'd just pay off my 10 grand credit card or whatever it was that I had at the time.
So how many Coles did you get for your 10 grand?
Oh, not many. It was like half a pallet or something. It was small, but it was such a small order, like,
Coles
5 actually. No, it was like, it wasn't. I can't remember exactly how many. And then my maths is ridiculous. So I didn't order like 10 grand's worth all in one hit. I ordered essentially, I think, 1 pallet's worth initially for my first order, which is about 18 pole sets.
Oh, that's all right.
So it was, that was fine. And then, this is the thing though, they were all 50 mil chrome.
Yeah.
And so landing into Sydney, in particular in Sydney, where the majority of studios here were all 38 mil brass, with the exception of there was one studio in Stanmore run by a dancer. His name was Daz. Anyway, he was I think he was like in one of those male cabaret groups that go and get all the girls worked up out at Panthers. So those sorts of groups. And he had a studio and they had 50 mil brass. But beyond that, all of the other studios in Sydney, because not that there was even that many of them, were generally pretty skinny poles.
Yeah. I remember going from a studio where I started, the studio was 38 brass. And then I went to another studio it was still brass, but it was 50. And it was like climbing a tree trunk.
They're very different. Yeah.
Yeah. They're huge. They're huge.
And it was the funny thing because that was, we'd had at our opening. So backtrack a little bit. So one other little thing that not many people know is that I'd actually asked Susie Q to be my business partner in the very early days. So Susie was actually my business partner for I don't know how many months. She's lovely. We're still really good friends. But anyway, she and I started the business together, and I think she thought I was a bit nuts because all I wanted to do was spend money. I came from this corporate background where we had, $1 million budgets for our brands. And so I'm like, right, we're going to order this and we're going to do this and we're going to do a photo shoot here and then we're going to advertise here and we're going to do these ads and stuff. And I think she was just like looking at me going, where is the money going to come from in all of this? Like, genuinely, where's the money coming from? So, bless her, she was around for like when we did the actual brand launch here in Sydney, and we did it at a club, just a normal club in the Cross, but it was just like a nightclub, and we had people like Chili was there, Sassy was there, which people won't remember Sassy, but Sassy Francine, she was lovely, back from
Oh,
that
yeah,
era as well.
I
Do you
remember
remember? Yeah, bright red hair.
her. Yeah, big
And
hair.
so, yeah. And
Yeah.
so we had Susie and we had Candace and we had Jamila. And so, we had everybody. And Bobby was actually our frontline person who was going to be performing. And unfortunately, she didn't end up performing on the night. But we had this beautiful picture of her as our main kind of invitation photo. And but it was a lovely night, except for the fact that majority of people had never seen an X pole before, and we had two or three set up on the main floor, and then obviously the poles up on the stage. But they went to perform, and of course they were 50 mil chrome, and all the girls had only ever danced on 38 mil brass, and had never seen them before they went up to go and dance. So from that perspective, it wasn't the greatest debut of a product.
Could they hold on to them?
Yeah, and they just danced around and made a show anyway. It was fine. People were just excited to be there because again, there were no pole events back then. So
No.
this was one of the first kind of actual pole events that was kind of really run. Like there weren't any other pole shows outside the strip clubs. So and we sort of went from that to then starting to do not regular, but anytime we did a product launch, we did another night out and we did shows and stuff sort of starting from there in mainstream venues quite deliberately. So,
And did you have to hire the venues or did they just want you in there?
a combination of both, but we did hire a couple of bars a couple of times for things like we did a breast cancer fundraiser, which raised I think $12,000 for National Breast Cancer Foundation, where we had a limited edition Jamila pole, which was a 42 mil titanium, which is as skinny as X poles used to come as, because with the screw thread at the time, which they were all screw together parts, that was as skinny as our engineers wanted to go without affecting stability. They didn't want to go to 38 mil. So it was only when we launched the X Lock that we were able to do the 40 mil, which is the skinny standard that we do today. And we did the breast cancer launch. We did that. We did another one at Slide where we did a fundraiser for neurology department, Sydney Kids Hospital. So pretty much any time we tried to do these events, we tried to tie it to a fundraiser so that rather than just making a door charge, because we already had the poles, we would tend to use their ceiling and just go floor to ceiling with the poles and they were pressure mounted. So we didn't need riggers or anything like that. Because again, it was a more of a club environment, even though we had stages and stuff where the people were performing, we didn't really need to put on a production, if you like. People would just come in, do some dancing, we'd have a break. It was kind of just a very different vibe to a lot of the pole shows today.
Yeah. And so that was to raise money, but to also build awareness about your brand.
Yeah, and also just to just raise awareness about pole within the mainstream community, because so many people did still see it and associate it with purely just with strippers. And even now, still, you sometimes get like those guys that go, "Oh, pole," they get that look in their eye, and you're just like, "Yeah, yeah." Literally, anybody that does pole knows exactly what I mean by that. And so taking it into clubs and stuff where girls were doing shows, but they weren't stripping, they were legitimately doing, they were inverting and spinning and doing all this incredible stuff. And guys would just go up afterwards and then try and, do what typical guy always tries to do in an Iron X, right? And they couldn't do it. And they were just like, wow. And then all of a sudden, it's just a little bit of a light bulb of little bit of respect, for what the girls are actually doing.
Yeah.
So we started trying to do more and more. And I think that was the biggest thing, that before we came along, there were no pole shows in mainstream venues at all. And so this was literally an opportunity for studio owners, for event organizers, for us as a brand to just take pole out of strip clubs and go, you know what, it is a legitimate form of dance. It's a legitimate form of exercise. We went into gyms, and fitness shows, and basically say, that there is, not every single girl that does this has these aspirations of wanting to be, you know, subservient to men and, you know, just basically to sit there and please men by taking their clothes off. We're actually doing it for a completely different reason. And usually it's because it helps make us feel strong. It helps empower us. It helps us feel, you know, in control, but also to feel really strong mentally, physically, but also within ourselves, that we are actually capable of doing things that we never thought we could do before we started going to pole class. So I think there's a whole lot more um, to taking pole out of those strip clubs, and a whole lot more to that sort of to I guess to running events in the early days. There was a lot more behind it than just kind of, okay, we're going to go out and just show off these girls. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. So how did you go with selling the first pallet that you ordered? Was it slow or did you sell?
Gosh, that's a hard question now. No, it wasn't hard at all. It was funny because I was living in a flat in Woolloomooloo, and so I'd have just people come and pick them up from the flat. So it was just, it was so strange, you know, they'd just come and like we had zip up bags that would go around the whole funny rectangle bags and people would go off with them. So yeah, it didn't take very long. And, you know, then there was always it was just keeping up after that, because then it was not just with orders, but then there were things like changes in parts. So we launched a 500 mil extension so that people that had taller ceilings could use them as well. And then the next thing was, you know, different widths and then different finishes. And then you know, later on the stages and then the, you know, join types and X locks and all sorts of things. So it's been a constant evolution. So it's just been kind of keeping up stock levels and things like that.
Yeah. So did you sign with Clive to be like the only person to be able to sell them in Australia? Did you initially do that to start with?
Well, yeah, it was funny because it was originally Expol at that stage was Clive working in England, and I went and visited him in October 2004, I think it was. And it was literally, I stayed at his house, and, you know, it was just funny because it was him and he had a home office.
Yeah, wow.
And so it was just him. And then eventually he took on a PA, and then he basically just started slowly employing more people as the brand took off. But at that stage, it was literally me and Clive. Like there was no one else in Expo.
Just you and Clive.
Just me and Clive.
Wow. What made him make a pole to start with?
So as far as this is again going back to many years ago, but as far as I'm aware, he was out one night with I don't know if his brother was there or not, but anyway, let's call it, there were a couple of blokes and they were out, and one of the guys at the table was a Formula One engineer, and they were talking about poles, and somebody put forward the challenge of making a pole that was fully removable, that basically wouldn't leave marks, but also was spin. And, you know, obviously this is where the F1 engineered concept comes from, because literally the engineer started talking about it, and Clive is incredibly technical. He's got a fabulous brain, and he was literally, you know, immediately going to all the technical details of how it would work and da, 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 da. And he's just such an entrepreneur. This is not his only business. This is not the only business he's ever had. And so, yeah, he basically, off the back of that, went straight into prototypes, and he was getting Katie Coates to test them, and they worked together in the early days on, you know, looking for different, I guess, styles, and he just developed the brand, and then that was it. It was just.
How did he find her?
I have no idea. That's actually a really good question.
Yeah.
I've lost touch with Katie. I'd love to speak to her actually again. She's still obviously involved with the pole world, and very much involved with the International Pole Sports Federation. You know, the one that does the petitioning for the Olympics. So
London to judge it, and that was the year the very first year it ran. Actually, I was in London judging it, and obviously she was running it. And we had the Olympic Committee come in to see.
Fabulous, yeah.
Because it was when the Olympics was in London.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So Katie's lovely, and she's been around the industry longer than me. right? So she
Yeah.
was already working with, working, when I say working with Clive, she was very much the face of the brand, and she was in all of the early DVD that still is used in all of the copyright and fake polls right now. Like if you go onto eBay or Kmart or, sorry, Big W or Dick Smith or any of those websites and type in dancing pole, you'll get about 20 of the copycat fake products come up. And anytime you see a little burnt DVD that's inserted in there, 90% of the time it's actually the original Katie Coates DVD that's been copied and burnt to disc and just gets sent along with it. So there's a lot of people that actually know Katie's face and, still even now, but even if they're not purchasing genuine X-Pol, they still know who Katie is. So that's funny.
So that's obviously been a big thing for you. Is Clive the one that sort of manages that, or you do the Australian side and you've got a certain budget that you need for legal every year?
Oh no, that's all funded by me. 100% funded by me. So the thing is, the issue with the Australian markets, we're so close to China, and we have a lot of dropship companies here. So majority of eBay sellers, in fact, a lot of the majority of the ones that are doing Big W Marketplace or Dick Smith Marketplace that are selling them, you're not actually buying it from Big W. You're buying it through their marketplace, and it is a fake or a copycat or a counterfeit product. And those sellers, because they're selling out of China, they can just drop ship the product straight into Australia. And people just don't know. Like there's 3 of them currently using our photos. And so for us to then chase them legally, we have to send cease and desist letters to the marketplace. So or to the individual seller if we can track down who they are. But unfortunately with these, the marketplaces like Dick Smith, for example, you have to contact Dick Smith as an organization and then try and do it. And it's the same for Groupon and it's the same for MyDeal and all of those websites. So it's very difficult for us to shut them down now. It was a lot easier going back 10 years ago. We spent a lot of money. Like one year I spent nearly $500,000 in federal circuit court just chasing one counterfeit seller. And what he did was he started up the business with selling, literally using our photos, our DVDs. He actually was using our full color boxes when he very first launched it. So he was doing that under a business name. So we sued the business. So what did he do? Closed the business and then just kept selling, but under a different name.
Wow.
So then the lawsuit goes out because obviously it was against the business. And so then we then had to take up Mr. Chen, and we then had to take up legal proceedings against him. So it took probably a good 4 years, nearly 5 years in total. And like I said, it was nearly $500,000 in legal costs to shut down. That was one seller. And so, yes, we got a judgment against him and we won. But insofar as recovering costs, you've got to remember if a lot of these sellers are overseas, so are their bank accounts. And so he had 13 different bank accounts. I subpoenaed all of them. I had all of the bank records, and I was literally going through with highlighters on my weekend, tracking money in and money out, trying to trace where the money was going for all of these different products. And I can tell you 100% now, none of it was staying in Australia. So he wasn't paying taxes on any of it, so many loopholes.
Did you get that money back? We were able to.
We got maybe total of about we scraped his accounts and we got about 150 grand back.
But you spent 500.
So, but we spent that much money to get it. Yeah, correct. So it's literally, this is the thing. So every single time a new counterfeit product comes up, we do send cease and desist letters. But they're getting a lot cleverer now. So they've now, instead of, I should say, show you some pictures sometimes of the instruction manuals they use, because they often use this photo of Jamila, right, where she's sitting on the pole wearing an X-Pol t-shirt. And the funniest thing is that was actually taken in my lounge room, that photo, in December 2004. And that was actually, so I know that's my photo. And the information that they use for their instruction manual, they have an FAQ section, and that was actually taken off the FAQs, copied off my website from 2006. So there's a photo of Sherry Edmonds, who runs a studio down in Tassie, sitting up high, like touching her ceiling, all of this stuff. So a lot of them still use that, but to get around the copyright, they do things like use the same photo of Jamila, but she will have no head, because they figure if doesn't have a head, we can't identify her as the same girl in the photo. or they call it D pole instead of X pole and things like that. So,
So is it worth going after them? Because it's just putting so much money into it.
yeah, look, if they sell under the X pole brand, it is. These days, we've pulled right back because we just can't afford it as a small business. We just can't afford it. It's not funded by head office, and they're not as exposed to it because they're not as close to China. So the import costs for somebody in the UK to pull in a whole load of fakes, they don't make the same level of margins. Whereas here they can, send it from China and have it landed over here for ridiculously cheap prices. But there's nobody policing it. And I think this is the biggest thing, especially for newbies listening to this, to understand is there are no safety standards in Australia when it comes to poles. And that goes for poles in studios all the way across to poles that you use at home. And so the danger of that is that somebody can I can go and get a pole and make it out of my shed from all of the fake parts and sell it on eBay and say it's got a 400 kilo rating. And I'll write that in writing on the thing in my description on eBay or list it on one of the marketplaces. If that pole falls, or if it snaps while you're using it, or if those joins that are actually not welded in, if they open and close and pinch your skin and tear your skin while you're on the pole, there is no recourse because you will go back to that eBay seller and they just close that eBay account, close that business and start again under a different seller name. A lot of these businesses are also registered under students, local students, so they can have a local address here, but they're actually nothing to do with the business. So they'll actually be on the company name over here, but they're actually nothing to do with the business at all. So it's a really convoluted and really messy, like a messy situation. And, when we were in federal court, we were able to show and demonstrate to the judge the difference between an ex-pole quality product versus the fake and the counterfeits and the dangers that have them. There's innumerable numbers of safety features that they've left out of these products, but there's no protection in Australia. So if you buy one, just because an ad says 200 kilos, if it falls and hurts you or damages your spine, there is nobody that's going to protect you from that.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, exactly right. Like I tell my students all the time, like when they want to get one for home, I'm like, do not buy it off Amazon. Do not. You don't know what it's going to do to you. You can go upside down once and you can have a broken back from it. I always say to them, go directly to the X-Pole website.
Yeah.
You're taking your life in your own hands by buying some sort of rubbish that's been sent into the country with no safety around it.
And this is the thing is they often don't know because there's a lot of companies that are set up and they've got beautiful websites or they've got beautiful photos because everyone just takes pole dancing images out of Canva now. So, loads of stock images. And so these poles look really legitimate and they look very much like every other fake pole. So it looks very commonplace and very, and that gives people a false sense of reassurance. And people always have this in their head that, if anything happens, I'll just sue them, right? Or the government will do something to it. The government won't do anything unless you have the same amount of money that we've spent going through federal court to sue somebody. There is no recourse for you. So it really is just a matter of, being responsible. We always say if you can't afford genuine X-Pole, buy second-hand X-Pole. Don't buy a fake one because for the same money, you'll get a good quality secondhand one. And we're more than happy to vet the secondhand ones for you. Or Toby J, contact the pole doctor. He will also look at it for you, but it's just not worth the risk.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I agree. Especially like if there is a pole selling for $150, it's usually pretty crap. Like a brand new pole for $150.
Some of them are now selling for $400. And I'm just like, it's exactly the same crappy, shitty. They do push joins instead of welding the screw threads in. They look, and then they chrome over the top. So you'd never know whether it's push join or whether it's actually welded in, right?
Yeah.
They leave out, they only have two bearings up the top and they leave out the thrust race, which means that there's nothing locking in the pole sitting into the top dome, pushing against the ceiling. So any sort of dynamic moves and that pole can move and those bearings can fail. But things like with the bases, they say they're articulating bases, but they're fully screwed into a complete 90-degree angle, meaning if you've got uneven floors or your floor and ceiling aren't completely parallel, that pole can slip and move while you're on it. But, how do you explain that? Because oftentimes they're bought as well by very well-intentioned partners. So I also say to girls, if you are starting pole and your birthday is coming up or Valentine's, tell them where to buy and very specifically what you want,
Yeah.
because otherwise they'll try and be nice, and then it's, you sound really ungrateful going, oh, you bought the like cheaper one, you didn't buy me the expensive pole. Like, it's like, but
But
it's about the quality and it's about safety. So
we just need to look at pole walls to see how many poles are falling all the time at home. Like it's
there
constant.
was there was one in overseas, and I want to say it was in Korea, but I can't remember exactly because it's going back probably about nearly 10 years ago now. And they had what they thought was a genuine X pole on stage, and the pole snapped in half while the girl was on it, and she shattered her pelvis, right?
Oh,
And so they contacted Expol Asia and were furious and were threatening lawsuits and all this sort of stuff, the organisers of the event. And turned out it was a counterfeit pole. It wasn't actually a genuine Expol. But literally, the join where the pole screwed together, because that was the way they used to go, it just snapped.
yeah.
Like, so it does happen, and we just, I guess the other side of it as well is, and what we say to studios is, if insurance is expensive enough in Australia. And if these sorts of accidents start becoming more commonplace, insurance companies are going to associate pole with a high risk activity or a higher risk activity, right? That'll drive insurance companies to charge more money to pole studios. To us as a small business, our insurance is ridiculous.
Mm.
And that makes it more expensive for the consumers at the end of the day. So if we can avoid that happening by people just choosing safe products and making safer choices, then it's better for everybody across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the expansion. So you went from different finishes, different sizes, and then you went into different products, yeah?
Yeah, so we've got it started originally, like I said, 50 mil chrome. That was it, floor to ceiling, pressure mounted. We then changed it. I think it was probably about 5 years in. Clive developed the X joint, which was a different type of joint. It was an expansion joint. And basically, it was to replace the screw threads. And the reason he did that was because it makes it a lot harder for counterfeits and fake sellers to actually copy the product. It's also a lot stronger, and it adds a lot of rigidity to the pole. So we switched to the X joint at the same time as we did that. The poles, instead of being tightened and tensioned up the very top of the pole, they switched it so the tensioning was done at the very bottom of the pole, and that just made it easier for an individual to install the pole by themselves rather than needing a buddy there to help them. So we introduced the well, we've changed the range completely now. We very rarely sell 50 mils actually now. It's all 40 and 45 mils, so the skinnies and then the 45s. 45s, interestingly, are the international standard. So over in the UK and in the US, a 45 mil, which is seen to be a wider pole in Australia, is actually the international standard.
Yeah.
And across Australia, I would say probably, it's definitely the wider poles are definitely more popular in, well, historically they were in Perth, actually, more these days the skinnier poles, but Queensland, South Australia, and
Yeah.
originally in Victoria too, but now they've sort of changed that up a little bit. So slowly people are getting a mix of different poles in their studios. So we do commercial poles as well as the home use poles. So but I think the biggest innovation that we've had was the X stage, and we launched that at least, well, I want to say around 2010, but that would be 15 years ago. So that seems like a really long time. But we originally launched the X stage, and at the time it was the first spinning static pole in one with a decent base. And when I say a decent base, one that wouldn't tip over, because there were some square ones originally back in the day. I don't know if you ever saw one of those. They were like a square, literally a square bottom, and they would tip if you tried to do anything up the top with your weight in it, they'd just tip over. So whereas at least at the circle, they're kind of designed to kind of move with you if they were going to move, but they don't tip over. But the advent of the X stage meant that people could pole outside and people could pole anywhere they had a decent floor. So decks, parks, gardens, beaches, you name it. And so this is like the first time that pole has moved not only outside into a mainstream environment as in a theatre or a club or a home, but now people can just pole anywhere they want to. And
Yeah.
that is in itself pretty awesome because, you want to go and live on an estate somewhere in the middle of nowhere. You can just take a pole and pole in a different paddock every day. Like, it's just so liberating. And I think that's the biggest thing. You just, yeah,
That's
complete.
So when the X stages first came out, I remember they were like a raised stage. So they were
Yeah,
raised
the
to
podiums.
the ground, yeah, the podium. And then
Yeah.
they got smaller, and now there's a new innovation in them.
Yes. So probably about 2 years ago, we launched an X-lock on our standard poles, which an X-lock essentially is one where you don't need tools to switch between a spinning or a static mode. So X-lock is unique to X-pole, it's patented, and basically it means you just lift and twist and the pole will go to static or spinning. Fabulous because it means that actually midway through your performance, you can actually change the pole from static to spinning, which is completely unique. Christy Sellers has been using it most recently on the America's Got Talent shows and shows like that to be able to switch the poles mid-performance. And probably about 6 months ago, they launched this. Basically, they launched it for X Stage in the UK. So anybody that went to the pole convention in the States recently would have actually seen them over there in the US. And we held back a little bit because it was a brand new product and we just wanted to see how it would go, how the market would take it, make sure that it had a before we got them over. And it's been really successful. So we've got ours landing for the first time in a couple of weeks, which we're really excited about. It's going to coincide with our 20-year X-Pole anniversary.
Yeah.
And so we're going to use it as an anniversary launch. So what better way to celebrate an anniversary than with a product launch? So there may or may not, I can possibly say, Andrea Rife has got our demo one, and she's actually been playing with it and she absolutely loves it. So if you're watching our socials in the next couple of weeks, you'll probably see Andrea on the X stage. But yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, so exciting and so easy. And I think that's what we all look for now. Everything we just want it to be easy and quick and not have to think too hard on things. And will you have a large amount of stock if people want to buy it?
Initially, we only have 20 coming in. So
Okay.
I've only got a really small number, and that's not to try and drive FOMO or anything like that. It's literally just we want to just test it and make sure that people see what people think about it. Um, check the functionality of it. We want to know how people are using it and just gauge the demand, I guess, because I don't want to we have to hold stock here of pretty much everything. So we hold all spare parts, we hold extensions for everything, we hold all this stuff. So we've at any point in time, we've got probably over 3.5, close on 4,000 items. Oh, sorry, not items, but SKUs in stock in Australia, just to cater for our current range. So when you're talking about such huge stock levels, I just want to make sure that I'm not over ordering initially and just see how it goes. We do have a follow-up order coming in, I think around for Black Friday time. So just in time for Black Friday. So that'll be cool. But initially it's going to be limited to, only a few lucky people.
And how much are they?
That's a really good question now. I actually don't know off the top of my head.
So
Because it's a Sunday night. They're not too dissimilar to the current X stages, put it that way. And actually, so I think we've kind of worked it out. So it's a similar price overall in that the actual inserts for the poles are a little bit cheaper than the standard inserts because the bearings are actually fixed to the stage base. So whilst the stage base appears to be slightly more expensive, it's got the bearings actually attached to the stage base. And so the pole insert that you get for these stages, it doesn't have the bearings attached on it like the original X stages did. So it's sort of a little bit of a so off the top of my head I can't tell you, and that's only purely as well because I think we've only just put it on our website in the last week or so. So it's not like off the top of my head just yet.
And what's the size and finish of them?
So we're going to do them in 40 and 40 mils. 40 and 45 millimeters diameter. So you can pretty much go with whatever your favorite width is. In the interim, I think we've got them in 40 mil brass, 45 stainless, and 45 powder coated. However, if you do have a an insert from a previous stage, you can actually just mix and match them. Some of them will need adapters because the actual bearings on the stage only come in the 45. So if you're wanting to use it with a 40 mil insert, you'll probably need an adapter unless you're getting one of the 40 mils that comes with it. But that's pretty easy to do. Like it's all made to all mix and match, and that's the beauty of it all. So
if somebody has an insert like a pole from a
mhm,
current X stage,
mhm.
can they buy the base separately from you if they wanted
They
to do?
can, yeah, they can just buy, and we're pretty much, I think, possibly the only office in the world that sells them separately, actually. But a few years ago, I realized that a lot of people were wanting to buy different poles to mix and match their training, especially in Australia, where we do have that really strong mix between some studios using 40 and some using 45. So I find a lot of people will actually end up over time buying both. And sometimes a silicon as well, because we do silicon for poling in winter, so you can pole in your clothes. But yeah, so yes, essentially you can use it. You just take the bearings off and use it in the stage base. If it is a 40 mil, like I said, you may need that adapter just to make sure that the pole's not rattling around inside that bearings on the stage base. But yeah, absolutely, you can use your original inserts. So yeah.
That's great. And what's the number one selling pole that you sell?
In Australia, 40 mil brass. It's 40 mil brass. Now, interestingly, what was really interesting through COVID, it was absolute by far and away, it was stages. Everybody wanted to be bowling outdoors wherever possible. So people, we couldn't keep any sort of pole in stock at that point in time. After COVID for a year or two, it continued. It was X stages, X stages. We couldn't keep enough of them in stock. Interestingly, this last year, the economy has played a really big part in people's choices, and people have switched from X stages back to floor to ceiling sets because they're cheaper. And not only that, they've also pulled back on the brass and they're going for finishes like our original finishes, like the chrome or the powder coated, because they're much more economical. So we've seen a huge switch in this last 12 months or so back to sets that are a little bit more affordable. And I think people just don't have the money at the moment to be able to spend on what they see to be luxury items. The positive in that, though, is they're still choosing to buy a pole that's safe and that's good and it's good quality, that comes with all the warranties and things, but they're just buying one that might not necessarily have been their first choice originally. In the last probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, we're seeing that switch back to X stage again. So it's really, it's interesting. It just ebbs and flows. We often find over summer, obviously X stages and A-frames for that matter, the aerial A-frames for the Lyras, they sell a lot more because people just enjoy being outdoors in Australia. So
That's all for today's episode of Pole Obsession. Huge thanks to Jessie for sharing her insights, and thanks to you for tuning in. If you've loved this chat, hit follow, share it with a friend, and check out the links in our show notes for more info. Until next time, keep spinning, and we will see you soon.